It is no secret that we, as Christians, believe in the God of the Bible. I know that those of us that are Christians, that are members of the Lord's body here at Fry Road, are believers in the God of the Bible. And I also know that as I travel in the Americas, I run into many people who believe in the God of the Bible. However, not everyone believes in the God of the Bible. I want us to focus just briefly here as we begin this lesson that when we speak of the God of the Bible, we are speaking of the Creator of the heavens and the earth. We are referencing the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob. We are calling upon the God of the Bible as the only true God who sent Jesus Christ. These are three outstanding facts that we find in the Bible. And these are tremendous and powerful evidences of the existence of the God of the Bible. But as I stand before you, and as I plan to speak tonight on this subject, I must ask you, is the God of the Bible your God? Does He remain as your God? Now, these questions I don't ask to provoke you, but I ask these questions in order that we may re-examine our faith. Re-examine why and how we believe in the God of the Bible. It is so sad to know that there are people around the world, even among us. We may even have kinfolks, we may have friends, may have neighbors that are not believers in the God of the Bible. So I often ask this question: if the God of the Bible is not your God, then who is your God? Now, you may think that that is a strange question to ask, but it isn't. It is a question that comes to our mind as we examine one tremendous example that we have in the Bible about people just like you and I who believed in God at one time and all of a sudden were no longer counted among the believers in God. I want us to go to Romans chapter 1. And I'm going to read beginning with verse 18 on down to verse 21. You know the chapter, you know the story, but this is the basis of our lesson tonight. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Indeed, this is a record that has served to impress upon our minds what can happen. It did happen. This is not an illusion. This is not just a reference. This is not just a fact. But it is a real danger when man becomes an unbeliever. Tonight, I want us to look closely at this tremendous example, because the question that I want you to keep in front of you tonight is, if not God, then who? Think about it. If it isn't God, then who is? Who is the God in your life? In Romans chapter 1 will serve as our example. First of all, we see here in chapter 1, the scriptures refer to these people as people that rejected the God of the Bible. Just look closely at how Paul develops these points, especially as you consider verse 19. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. There's no excuse. The evidence, the facts, is that there is a God. And he says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen. What else? Being understood by the things that are made, even the eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. And listen carefully. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. A rejection of God, a rejection of God as the Creator. What a problem. What a problem to have. Rejecting the God, rejecting the evidence, rejecting what they knew, rejecting the things that God has shown them so that they could believe. It was not a matter of them not being able to believe. It was a matter of them refusing to believe. It was a matter of them leaving what they had believed, leaving those things that they were practicing and abandoning those things that were right in the sight of God. They rejected the God of the Bible. They rejected the God that had created all things. They rejected the evidence. But look closely again at these scriptures. And we find in verse 22 and 23 the following. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. What did these people do that rejected God? They created their own God. Very simple. They didn't want the God that had taught them. They didn't want the God that has shown himself as the Creator. They didn't want to follow the God of the Bible. They didn't want to see these evidences that existed. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and they changed God. Now let me explain here just briefly. It's not that they were able to change the character of God. They were not able to change anything that God was and is. But what it was is that they were working this in their mind. They were working their attitude. They were working their imagination. And they said, we're going to fabricate. We're going to build. We're going to create an image so that we can worship that image instead of the real and true God. That's what it says. Change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man. Worshiping the creature. What an ability on the mind of man. What was the motive behind it? What was the thing that moved these people to reject God and to create their own God? In verse 25, I want us to read very carefully a very simple phrase that Paul uses here. Who exchanged the truth of God for the lie. What was true about God, what was true about his existence, what was true of his life, of his word, of his purpose, this truth of God, even the simple creation, these people exchanged, and they believed the lie instead of the truth. These are things that move these people to do the things that they did. And believe me, these are the same things that are moving people today to reject the God of the Bible. But these are examples that we have. These are examples that we have that will help us to see that this is not a fiction. This is real. This really happened. And that's why Paul was writing to the Romans to emphasize and to put before them how people who knew God had exchanged the truth of God and were no longer honoring God. What do these people do? They're in verse 25. Look at it again. When he says, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. People that believed in the God of the Bible, people that were worshiping God, people that were serving God, that were recognizing God as the Creator, as the Savior, now they had turned their mind, their time, their efforts to worship the images that they had created. The image that they had created was corruptible. The God that they had rejected was incorruptible. He was the creator. He was the good guy. He was the right person to worship and to serve. But I want you to notice something else as we consider this tremendous example. These people that rejected God, we are told in very strong language what happened to these people. Beginning with verse 22, professing to be wise, they became fools. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And if there is no God in his mind, there is no accountability. If there is no belief in the God of the Bible, the true God, people are going to go crazy. They're going to go crazy and they're going to do things that are awful, that are self-pleasing. They will even worship themselves. Not only will they go to the extent of worshiping a created image, But they are going to worship themselves. They're going to serve themselves. They're going to have an egotistic spirit. How do we know? Look at verse 24. Therefore, and I want us to look at that word very closely. That word explains something. It follows something that happened. What happened to these people? They became fools, and they changed the glory of the incorruptible God, etc. And because they did this, God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves. What did they do? What did these people do? Paul says that they turned to uncleanness. They decided to follow their lust, to dishonor their bodies among themselves. Read on. Who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the nature use of the woman, burn in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not even like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness. It goes on and on and on. But you know what's even worse? Look at verse 32. Who, knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. This is how corrupt the mind of these people became because they rejected God. They placed themselves as the idols. They substituted God. They were without control, no morals, no shame, completely given over to every kind of human carnal satisfaction. I have here a parallel passage that we often use to explain the language, to explain what took place in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, beginning with verse 7. Paul writes to the church, and do not become idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. What did they do? They decided to involve themselves in every kind of sinful act. No shame, no accountability according to them, because there's no God. They have rejected the God of the Bible. And what you see here is a corruption. Not only do you see this corruption in public, but you see it in private. You see it everywhere. It is advertised. It is advanced in nearly every other method of communication. It's in the cell phone, iPads, the media. And so sad that even among religious people. You've heard the news. You read it. There's no shame. Even those that pretend to be following the God of the Bible, look at their actions. Look at their behavior. Don't be fooled. Do not be deceived by their behavior, thinking that because they proclaim to honor God, but with their deeds, they show totally different attitudes. These people that Paul is talking about here in Romans chapter 1 became fools, and they dishonored themselves. They corrupted themselves. And they did this because they did not think that they had a responsibility before God. These were people that at one time believed in the God of the Bible. But I want us to look carefully at what Paul adds here in conclusion. Paul mentions throughout this context God's judgment. You know, it's so strange for people to believe that because they don't believe in the God of the Bible, that they can get away with it. It is so sad that people block God from their mind, block God from their lives, and think that they are not accountable to God. Look at verse 18 of chapter 1. Look closely at the words, because it speaks loud and clear. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. You think he's happy about that? The wrath of God speaks loud and clear of God's judgment. It speaks very clearly that God does not approve of ungodliness, and those are the sins that are committed against God. It also points to the unrighteousness of men. And that is how man treats man. And Paul is saying that the wrath of God is revealed. It stands out. Look at verse 24. Therefore, God also gave them up. God said, enough is enough. No more. I'm not going to put up with that. You want to do it? Go ahead and do it. But God did that because they had rejected God. Listen carefully. This is the consequences of their acts. This is the results of people doing what is not right. God is taking action, and he says, enough is enough. You have filled my cup. Look at verse 26. For this reason, their behavior, God gave them up to vile passions. And he speaks about women exchanging the natural use of women. And it speaks the same thing of men. Homosexuality, right now, in our world, gay pride is being celebrated. Just as we sit here right now. It's been going on. It's on TV. It's around the world. It's not new. It was happening here. It was happening here. Did God approve of it? Did God say it was okay to do it? Did God tell his people, go right ahead and do it? No, he spoke about people. You have filled my cup. Go ahead now. Do what you want to do, but you're going to suffer the consequences. Look at verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. Again, God's judgment. God's judgment stands out. And in verse 32, who knowing the righteous judgment of God. What kind of judgment is it? We hear, you read, I read. Everyone has rights. Everyone has rights. Everyone. You have the right to kill. You have the right to steal. You have the right to lie. You have the right to live any kind of life you want to live. But the consequences, the results, are totally different. The Bible points to that. The Bible speaks clearly of this. And these people, according to Paul, these people, knowing the righteous judgment of God, they knew that this was right, that God was punishing them. They knew that that was right. And what do they do? What do they do? Knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. That's what it says. That's what the Bible teaches. But look, I know and you know that Paul was referencing the Gentiles in chapter 1. I know that and you know that. But I want you to look closely at chapter 2. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter, but I just want you to listen to what he continues to say. Here's again that word, therefore. Everything that was said about the Gentiles, therefore, you are inexcusable, O man, whoever you are who judge. For in whatever you judge another, you condemn yourself. For you who judge practice the same things. But look at how he changes the pronouns. But we know that the judgment of God is according to truth against those who practice such things. Who was he talking to? To the Jews. He's talking to the Jews. Are you any better? Are you any better than the Gentiles? You do the same thing. You condemn them, and yet you do the same thing. So let us be very careful. Let us be very careful today that we don't do the same thing. And we start to conclude, well, you know, this is a problem only among pagans. No. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say that this problem is just among certain people, certain races. Oh yeah, you got to watch out for those kind of people because they do these things. That's not true. That's a lie. In America, homosexuality is doing great. In Peru, in Mexico, in Cuba, I know because I've been there. And I live here in Houston. And I know that these problems are not problems that other people have. So let us not speak that way. Let us recognize exactly what Paul was saying here. It make any difference who rejects the God of the Bible. God's judgment will come against them and against all. So these are points, my brethren, that we today must be ready to understand. And as we conclude with this lesson, if the God of the Bible is not your God, then make him your God. Make him your God by recognizing the God of love, the God of salvation, and the God that is willing to save us through Jesus Christ. It may be that at one time you believed in the God of the Bible, but you have decided not to believe in the God of the Bible. Well, we beg you tonight to reconsider, to place your faith in the God of the Bible. And the reason is that the God of the Bible, as much as he is the God of love, is also the God of righteous judgment. So sooner or later, we will give an account of our deeds. So let us consider to do those things that are right. An invitation song is being prepared. Shall we stand and sing, and we invite you.